Settle in for the night as we drift back to the earliest tales ever spun by Greek voices. These are the stories whispered long before Olympus crowned its kings, before gods claimed the heavens, and before thunder found its name. This is the saga of the Titans, vast, ancient beings who shaped the cosmos long before Zeus hurled his first bolt of lightning. It's a tale woven from power, prophecy, and rebellion, with shadows stretching from the feet of forgotten giants. If these gentle myths help you unwind, you're welcome to like and subscribe, but only if it truly brings you rest. Share in the comments where you're listening from and what hour finds you here. There's a quiet comfort in letting ancient chaos murmur you to sleep. So, breathe deeply, let the stars slip away, and join me as we begin the story of the Titans. In the beginning, before the world had shape or song, before the Titans strode across the land and gods quarrelled over thunder, there was only chaos. Not the chaos of a toppled bookshelf or a storm-tossed ship, but something deeper, older, and altogether stranger. The Greeks, with their taste for mystery and metaphor, imagined this chaos as the first and oldest thing, a yawning emptiness, a cosmic hush that stretched beyond the reach of memory. It was not darkness, nor light, nor even the absence of both. It was the absence of everything. No stars blinked in the sky, for there was no sky. No earth lay beneath, for there was no earth. No wind stirred, no water flowed, no fire crackled. Chaos was the silent breath before the first word, the blank page before the first poem. It was the space between dreams, the pause before creation. Yet, in this vast and formless void, something began to stir. Not with a bang nor a flash, but with the slow, inevitable unfolding that marks the birth of all things. The Greeks did not imagine a creator with a plan, nor a craftsman with tools. Instead, they saw chaos as the fertile ground from which possibility itself would sprout. Out of this emptiness, the first presences emerged, not as children, but as principles, as forces, as the raw bones of reality. From chaos came Gaia, the earth, ancient and enduring. She was not born into the world. She was the world. Her body would become the hills and valleys, the rivers and forests, the cradle for all that would follow. Alongside her appeared Tartarus, the deep abyss, a shadowy echo beneath the surface, destined to become the prison for gods and monsters alike. Eros, the force of attraction, arrived as well. Not the playful cherub of later tales, but the primal urge that binds and creates, the glue that would hold the universe together. Night itself took form as Nyx, shrouded in mystery and older than any god who would come after. Erebus, the darkness of the underworld, followed, not evil but simply unlit, a companion to Nyx in the silent depths. These were not beings as we know them, but concepts given shape, the first brush strokes on the canvas of existence. Chaos, then, was not a villain nor a hero, but the stage upon which all stories would be told. It was the silent witness to the birth of earth and sky, of love and darkness, of all the tangled threads that would weave the tapestry of myth. In its emptiness there was infinite potential, and from its silence the first voices would rise. So the Greeks began their tale not with certainty, but with mystery, not with order, but with possibility. And in that ancient hush the seeds of everything were sown. From the hush of chaos, where possibility hung like dew on the edge of dawn, the first presences began to take shape. Gaia, the earth, was the first to emerge, not as a child, but as the very bones and breath of the world itself. She was not born into a landscape, she was the landscape. Her body stretched wide and deep, forming the hills that would cradle future shepherds, the valleys that would echo with laughter, the rivers that would carve their way through stone, and the forests that would one day shelter gods and mortals alike. Gaia was the matriarch, the foundation, the patient mother who bore the weight of all that was and all that would be. But Gaia was not alone in this newborn cosmos. From the same silent void came Tartarus, the abyss. If Gaia was the surface, Tartarus was the depth, a brooding, endless chasm beneath the world, darker than the darkest night, colder than the coldest stone. Tartarus was not a place of punishment, not yet. He was simply the shadow beneath creation, the echo that reminded all things of their limits. He would one day become the prison for the unruly and the rebellious, but for now he simply was, a presence as ancient as Gaia herself. Then, with a whisper rather than a shout, Eros arrived. Not the mischievous archer of later tales, but the primordial force of attraction, the principle that drew things together and made creation possible. Eros was the pulse in Gaia's veins, the urge that would bind earth and sky, this silent promise that from union would come life. Without Eros, the universe would have remained a scattered dream, a collection of lonely fragments. With him, the cosmos took its first breath, and the dance of becoming began. Night herself stepped forth, cloaked in velvet darkness. Nyx was older than any god who would ever claim a throne, her presence both comforting and fearsome. She moved through the world like a shadow, her silence deeper than sleep, her mystery more profound than prophecy. Even Zeus, in ages yet to come, would tread carefully in her presence. Alongside Nyx came Erebus, the darkness of the underworld, not evil, not cruel, simply unlit. Erebus was the companion to night, the gentle shade that softened the edges of existence. These primordial beings were not gods in the way mortals would later imagine. They did not meddle in human affairs or disguise themselves for mischief. They were forces, concepts, the raw ingredients of reality. Gaia was the earth beneath every footstep, Tartarus the depth beneath every fear, Eros the spark in every union, Nyx the silence in every dream, Erebus the shadow in every corner. From their presence the world began to take form, not with thunder or spectacle, but with the slow, patient unfolding of possibility. The Greeks saw in these stories the truth of beginnings, that before there were heroes and monsters, before there were battles and betrayals, there was simply the world, ancient and enduring, waiting for its story to be told. And so, from chaos, the first chapter was written, and the stage was set for all that would follow. From the gentle unfolding of Gaia's form and the silent depths of Tartarus, the cosmos began to yearn for company. Gaia, ever fertile and restless, felt the ache of solitude beneath the endless sky. So, with a will as ancient as stone, she brought forth Uranus, the sky. He was not a man perched on a cloud, but the vast, shimmering dome that arched over Gaia's body, a lid of blue and silver pressed close in an eternal embrace. The ancients believed the sky was solid, a celestial vault, and Uranus was its keeper, stretching from horizon to horizon, sheltering the earth below. Together, Gaia and Uranus became the first parents, their union as inevitable as dawn following night. From their embrace the world blossomed with new life, not with birds and trees, but with beings of immense power and strange design. Their first children were the Titans, 12 in all, each embodying a force or principle that would shape the fate of gods and mortals alike. Oceanus, the endless river encircling the world, Hyperion, the light-bringer, Coeus and Creus, whose names would fade into riddles, Themis, wise and just, Mnemosyne, memory itself, Phoebe, shining intellect, Rhea, destined to be a mother of gods, and Kronos, the youngest, sharpest, and most ambitious of them all. But Gaia's creative spirit did not rest with the Titans. She and Uranus also birthed the Cyclopes, enormous smiths with a single blazing eye, and the Hecatonchires, beings so bizarre that even the wildest imagination might falter. Each Hecatonchire had 50 heads and 100 arms, a living storm of limbs and faces, impossible to comprehend and even harder to love. Uranus, for all his grandeur, was unsettled by these monstrous offspring. The Cyclops and Hecatonchires, with their thunderous strength and strange forms, filled him with dread. In a fit of divine discomfort, Uranus forced them back into Gaia's depths, not metaphorically but physically, pressing them into the earth's womb, where they groaned and raged in darkness. Gaia, burdened and wounded by this act, felt pain ripple through her every hill and valley. She was not a passive victim. Her patience had limits, and her sorrow grew heavy as stone. In the quiet agony of her suffering, Gaia began to plot. She shaped a great sickle from flint, one of the few materials at hand in a world still raw and unfinished. Then she whispered to her Titan sons, urging them to rise against their father and free their imprisoned siblings. Only Kronos, clever and bold, answered her call. Under the cover of night, Kronos lay in wait, sickle in hand, as Uranus descended to embrace Gaia. With a swift, merciless stroke, Kronos struck, forever changing the fate of the cosmos. From the blood of Uranus, spilled upon Gaia's soil, new beings sprang forth, the Furies, agents of vengeance, the giants, destined to challenge the gods, and the Meliae, gentle nymphs of the ash trees. Uranus's severed flesh tumbled into the sea, and from this churning foam, Aphrodite emerged radiant and beautiful, a paradox born of violence and grace. Thus the cycle of creation and rebellion began, and the stage was set for the next age of myth. Kronos stood triumphant, the sickle still slick with the blood of the sky, and the world trembled beneath the weight of a new order. Uranus, broken and silent, retreated to the farthest reaches, leaving Gaia and her children to shape the fate of all things. The Titans, freed from the shadow of their father, gathered around Kronos, who now wore the mantle of king. His rule was not forged in peace, but in the sharp edge of rebellion. A golden age, yes, but one gilded with the memory of violence. Under Kronos, the cosmos settled into a rhythm. The rivers ran clear, the forests grew thick, and the mountains rose higher than ever before. Mortals had not yet appeared, but the world itself seemed to breathe easier, as if relieved by the absence of Uranus's oppressive gaze. The Titans took their places. Oceanus encircled the earth with his endless waters. Hyperion brought light to the sky, and Themis whispered the laws that would one day bind gods and men. Memory, wisdom, and justice flourished, and for a time all was well. Yet, even in this golden age, shadows lingered. Kronos, sharp-eyed and wary, remembered the prophecy whispered by Gaia, that he too would be overthrown by his own child. The words gnawed at him, a slow poison in the heart of his reign. He watched his siblings with suspicion, but it was Rhea, his sister and queen, who drew his deepest fears. For every child she bore, Kronos felt the chill of destiny creeping closer. Determined to defy fate, Kronos devised a cruel solution. Each time Rhea gave birth, Kronos appeared stern and unyielding, and swallowed the newborn whole. Hestia, goddess of the hearth, Demeter, bringer of harvest, Hera, regal and proud, Hades, lord of the underworld, and Poseidon, master of the seas, all vanished into the darkness of Kronos' belly, their cries muffled by the silence of his resolve. Rhea wept, her grief echoing through the halls of the world, but Kronos remained unmoved, convinced that he could outwit the prophecy. But fate, in the world of myth, is a patient adversary. Rhea, desperate and cunning, sought Gaia's counsel. Together they hatched a plan as old as rebellion itself. When her sixth child was born, a son strong and bright, Rhea wrapped a stone in swaddling cloth and presented it to Kronos. He swallowed it without question, never suspecting the deception. The true child, Zeus, was spirited away to a hidden cave on the island of Crete, where nymphs and the gentle goat Amalthea nursed him in secret. So the golden age of Kronos was marked by both abundance and fear, by the promise of peace and the certainty of change. The world waited, breath held, as the prophecy lingered in the air like distant thunder. And in the shadows, Zeus grew, destined to challenge the old order and carve his own name into the tapestry of myth. Hidden away in the cool shadows of Crete, Zeus grew strong, his laughter echoing through the secret cave where nymphs tended him, and the gentle goat Amalthea offered her milk. Meanwhile, far above, Kronos ruled with a heavy hand and a heart burdened by fear. The prophecy that he would be undone by his own child haunted his every moment, and the memory of the stone he had swallowed in place of his youngest son gnawed at the edges of his certainty. Yet he clung to his throne, convinced that his cunning had outwitted fate. Rhea, though outwardly resigned, carried her sorrow quietly, her eyes lingering on the empty cradles and the silent halls where her children should have played. The world itself seemed to mourn with her. The winds sighed through the forests, and the rivers ran slower, as if grieving for the lost god swallowed by Kronos' relentless hunger. The Titans, too, felt the weight of their king's paranoia, their golden age dimmed by the shadow of his fear. Kronos' rule was marked by abundance, but it was an abundance tinged with unease. The fields yielded grain, the orchards bore fruit, and the seas teemed with life. Yet the laughter of children was absent, and the promise of new beginnings was stifled. Kronos sat upon his throne surrounded by his siblings, but the emptiness within him grew with each passing year. He had devoured Hestia, Demeter, Hera, Hades, and Poseidon, believing that by consuming their potential, he could consume his own fate. But fate, as ever, is patient and persistent. In the hidden cave, Zeus learned the stories of his family's suffering. He listened to the whispers of Gaia and the songs of the nymphs, and his resolve hardened like mountain stone. He was not merely a child of prophecy. He was the embodiment of hope, the promise that even the darkest rule could be challenged. As he grew, the world seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the moment when the balance would tip and the old order would tremble. One day, when Zeus was ready, he left the safety of his cave and journeyed to the halls of Kronos. Disguised and clever, he gained entry to his father's court, where suspicion and silence reigned. With the help of Metis, the wise and resourceful Titaness, Zeus concocted a potion that would force Kronos to yield what he had stolen. Kronos, unsuspecting, drank the bitter draught, and the spell took hold. One by one, the swallowed gods emerged from the darkness of Kronos' belly, reborn and unbroken. Hestia, Demeter, Hera, Hades, and Poseidon returned to the world, their spirits undimmed by years in shadow. Rhea wept with joy, and the halls of the world rang with the laughter of reunited siblings. The prophecy had come to pass, not through violence, but through cunning, courage, and the unyielding hope of a mother and her son. Thus, the stage was set for the great struggle to come, as the children of Kronos prepared to challenge the old king and claim their place in the unfolding story of the cosmos. The world, once silent and subdued beneath Kronos' reign, now pulsed with new energy. Zeus, no longer a hidden child, stood tall among his siblings. Hestia, Demeter, Hera, Hades, and Poseidon, each one restored from the darkness of their father's belly. Their reunion was not merely a family's joy, but the stirring of a storm that would sweep through the cosmos. The halls of the world echoed with their laughter, their plans, and the quiet determination that only those who have known captivity can possess. Kronos, sensing the shift in fate, felt the old prophecy tighten around him like a chain. The children he had tried to erase now stood before him, their eyes bright with purpose. The golden age he had forged through fear and devouring was crumbling, and the certainty he once held slipped through his fingers like sand. Yet, Kronos was not a king to yield easily. He summoned the Titans, his brothers and sisters, and prepared for war, determined to hold on to his throne by any means. Zeus, wise beyond his years and guided by the counsel of Metis, knew that brute strength alone would not win the day. He sought allies among those who had suffered under Kronos' rule. Deep within Gaia's earth, the Cyclops and the Hecatonchires, those monstrous children whom Uranus and Kronos had both cast into darkness, waited in their prison. Zeus descended into Tartarus, braving its shadows and terrors, and freed them with promises of justice and freedom. The Cyclops, grateful and eager, gifted Zeus with thunder and lightning, forging weapons of unimaginable power. The Hecatonchires, with their 100 arms, became a living tempest, hurling boulders and shaking the very foundations of the world. With these allies, Zeus and his siblings stood ready to challenge the old order. The war that followed was unlike any before. The sky split with thunder, the earth trembled and the seas boiled. Titans and Olympians clashed, their battles echoing through every corner of existence. Kronos wielded his sickle, the symbol of his rebellion, but Zeus's lightning was swifter and more relentless. The Hecatonchires unleashed storms of stone, and the Cyclops roared with the fury of creation itself. For 10 years the struggle raged, neither side yielding. The world itself seemed to hold its breath, caught between the old and the new, but fate, ever patient, favoured those who dared to challenge it. In the final clash, Zeus hurled his thunderbolt, shattering Kronos' defences and breaking the will of the Titans. The old king fell. His reign ended not by cunning or prophecy, but by the courage and unity of those he had tried to destroy. With victory claimed, Zeus and his siblings stood atop the world, the first true gods of Olympus. The Titans, defeated, were cast into Tartarus, their power bound by chains of fate. The age of Kronos was over, and a new era began, one shaped by hope, struggle, and the promise that even the mightiest can be undone by those they seek to silence. The world, newly awakened by the thunder of victory, found itself trembling on the edge of transformation. Zeus, crowned by the storm and flanked by his siblings, stood in the halls where Kronos once ruled with iron certainty. The taste of freedom was sharp and sweet, but the wounds of the past lingered in every shadow. The Titans, defeated and cast into Tartarus, groaned in their prison, their voices echoing through the deepest chasms of the earth. Yet the old king's legacy was not so easily erased. Zeus, wise and wary, knew that the world could not simply forget the long years of Kronos' reign. The scars ran deep, and the memory of swallowed children haunted the halls of Olympus. The gods, though restored, carried within them the silence and darkness of their captivity. Hestia's hearth burned with a quiet longing. Demeter's fields grew with bitter-sweet abundance. Hera's pride was tempered by sorrow. Hades's gaze lingered on the shadows, and Poseidon's laughter was edged with thunder. But Zeus, ever the child of prophecy and hope, refused to let the past define the future. He called his siblings together, their reunion a tapestry of joy and pain, and spoke of a new order, one built not on fear, but on unity and promise. The world, he declared, must be divided, each god given a realm to shape and protect. The sky, the sea, and the underworld would each have a ruler, and the earth would be shared, its bounty a gift to all. With solemn ceremony the gods drew lots. Zeus claimed the sky, his throne set among the clouds and stars, where thunder and lightning answered his call. Poseidon took the sea, his trident stirring the depths and commanding the waves. Hades accepted the underworld, his realm a silent kingdom of shadows and secrets. Hestia tended the hearth, Demeter watched over the harvest, and Hera became queen of Olympus, her wisdom guiding the new age. Yet, even as the gods settled into their domains, the world itself seemed to hold its breath. The Titans, though imprisoned, remained a presence in the deep, their power undiminished by chains. Gaia, ancient and enduring, watched with patient eyes, her heart heavy with the memory of rebellion and loss. The cycle of creation and conflict was not ended, only paused as the new gods learned the weight of their crowns. Zeus, restless and ambitious, felt the stirrings of fate in every thunderclap. He knew that victory was not the end, but the beginning of a greater struggle, a struggle to balance power, justice, and the wild forces that still roamed the world. The gods, for all their might, were bound by the same laws that had shaped their parents and grandparents. Prophecy lingered, and the seeds of future rebellion lay hidden in the soil of every promise. So the world turned, its story unfolding beneath the watchful eyes of gods and titans alike. The halls of Olympus rang with laughter and debate, the seas danced with Poseidon's storms, and the underworld whispered with Hades' secrets. The age of Kronos was over, but the echoes of his rule would shape every tale yet to come. The world, divided and ruled by the new gods, settled into uneasy peace. Olympus rose high above the clouds, its marble halls gleaming with the promise of order and justice. Yet beneath this shining surface, the memory of rebellion and imprisonment simmered, and the Titans, bound in Tartarus, brooded in their darkness. The air was thick with prophecy, and the earth itself seemed to tremble with anticipation, as if it knew that the story was far from finished. Zeus, now king of the gods, felt the weight of his crown with every thunderclap. He was not content to simply rule. He sought to secure his place, to ensure that the old wounds would not reopen. But the Titans, proud and ancient, refused to accept their fate. Kronos, though defeated, whispered of vengeance, and his siblings stirred in their chains, their strength undiminished by years in shadow. The war that followed, the Titanomachy, was unlike any conflict the world had ever known. For 10 years the heavens shook and the earth groaned as gods and titans clashed in battles that blurred the line between myth and reality. Lightning split the sky, mountains crumbled and oceans boiled. The Hecatonchires hurled boulders with their 100 arms, the Cyclops forged weapons of unimaginable power, and the Titans unleashed storms and earthquakes, their fury echoing through every corner of existence. Gaia, ancient and enduring, watched with sorrow as her children tore the world apart. She remembered the pain of Uranus, the rebellion against Kronos, and now the struggle between Titans and Olympians. The cycle of creation and conflict seemed endless, each generation rising only to be cast down by the next. Yet, in the heart of chaos, hope flickered, a hope that the world might one day find balance. Zeus, guided by wisdom and the counsel of Metis, rallied his siblings and allies. He knew that victory would not come from strength alone, but from unity and resolve. The Olympians fought not just for power, but for the promise of a new age, an age where the world could flourish, free from the tyranny of fear and vengeance. In the final battle, Zeus unleashed the full fury of his thunderbolts, shattering the defences of the Titans and breaking their will. The Hecatonchires, once imprisoned, now stood as guardians, casting the defeated Titans into Tartarus and sealing the gates with unbreakable chains. Kronos, the old king, fell silent, his reign ended by the very prophecy he had tried to escape. With the Titans imprisoned and the world restored, Zeus and his siblings claimed their thrones. Olympus became the seat of divine power, its halls filled with laughter, debate, and the promise of justice. The earth healed, the seas calmed, and the sky shone brighter than ever before. Yet the memory of the Titanomachy lingered, a reminder that even the mightiest could be undone, and that the cycle of creation and conflict would shape every story yet to come. With the thunder of war faded and the Titans sealed away in the shadowy depths of Tartarus, the world exhaled, a long trembling sigh that echoed through mountain, sea, and sky. The Olympians, victorious but weary, gathered atop their new home, Olympus, a palace of cloud and marble perched above the mortal realm like a beacon of promise and power. Yet, even as laughter and song filled the halls, the gods knew that the world beneath them was forever changed. Zeus, king of the sky, stood at the heart of this new order. His lightning had shattered the old chains, but now he faced a different challenge, the delicate balance of rule. The cosmos, vast and wild, could not be governed by one alone. So, with wisdom and ceremony, Zeus called his siblings to divide the spoils of victory, each god entrusted with a realm to shape and defend. The 3 brothers, Zeus, Poseidon, and Hades, drew lots beneath the gaze of their sisters and the watchful eyes of fate. Zeus claimed the heavens, his throne set among the stars, where thunder rolled and clouds gathered at his command. Poseidon, trident in hand, took the restless sea, its depths and tempests now his to rule. Hades, silent and solemn, accepted the underworld, a kingdom of shadows and secrets, where the souls of mortals would find their rest. Hestia, gentle and steadfast, tended the hearth, her flame a symbol of home and peace. Demeter watched over the fields, coaxing grain from the earth and fruit from the trees, her touch a promise of plenty. Hera, proud and wise, became queen of Olympus, her counsel guiding the gods through the tangled paths of fate and desire. With the world thus divided, the Olympians set about their tasks. Zeus filled the sky with storms and sunlight, Poseidon stirred the oceans with his moods, and Hades shaped the silent halls below. The earth blossomed under Demeter's care, and every hearth glowed with Hestia's warmth. Hera's wisdom wove order through the chaos, binding the gods together in uneasy harmony. Yet, beneath this new order, the memory of the Titans lingered. Their voices, muffled by Tartarus's walls, haunted the dreams of gods and mortals alike. Gaia, ancient and enduring, watched with quiet sorrow, her heart heavy with the knowledge that every victory bore the seeds of future conflict. The cycle of creation and rebellion was not ended, only paused, as the Olympians learned the burdens of power. Zeus, ever watchful, felt the stirrings of fate in every thunderclap. He knew that the world was a tapestry woven from both triumph and loss, and that the promise of peace was always shadowed by the possibility of change. The gods, for all their might, were bound by the same laws that had shaped the Titans before them. And so the story continued, each day a new thread in the endless weave of myth, each god a guardian of both order and chaos. The halls of Olympus gleamed with new order, yet even as the gods settled into their realms, the old whisper of prophecy lingered in the air. Zeus, lord of the sky, felt the weight of fate pressing upon his brow. The stories of Uranus and Kronos were not so distant. Each had been undone by the very children they sought to control. Now, with the world divided and peace tenuous, Zeus found himself haunted by the same shadow that had pursued his father. It was Metis, wise and gentle, who first caught Zeus's eye. She was clever, her counsel sharp as a blade, and her presence soothed the storms within him. Yet, as their bond grew, the ancient warning reached Zeus's ears. Metis would bear a child greater than its father, one who might one day challenge even the king of gods. The prophecy was a thread woven into the tapestry of fate, impossible to ignore. Zeus, remembering the lessons of the past, resolved to act before destiny could turn against him. With a heavy heart he called Metis to his side, speaking softly of trust and love. Then, in a moment both tender and terrible, Zeus opened his mouth and swallowed her whole, hoping to contain the threat within himself. The act was not born of cruelty, but of fear, a desperate attempt to break the cycle that had toppled Uranus and Kronos before him. Yet, fate is not so easily denied. Within Zeus, Metis continued to live, her wisdom mingling with his own, her spirit shaping the thoughts and dreams of the king. Time passed, and Zeus began to suffer a strange pain, a pressure within his skull, growing sharper with each day. The gods watched with concern as their king grew restless, his thunderclouds gathering and dispersing in uneasy patterns. Finally unable to bear the agony, Zeus called for Hephaestus, the smith of the gods. With a steady hand and a heavy axe, Hephaestus split open Zeus's forehead. From the wound sprang Athena, fully grown and clad in gleaming armour, her eyes bright with the light of understanding. She stood tall and unafraid, a child of both wisdom and power, her birth a miracle born from prophecy and defiance. The gods marvelled at Athena's arrival, her presence a sign that the old cycle could be transformed. She was not a threat but a blessing, a new kind of strength, forged from the union of wisdom and might. Zeus, relieved and awed, welcomed his daughter, her counsel soon becoming indispensable in the halls of Olympus. Yet the lesson lingered. Prophecy cannot be swallowed or silenced. It weaves through every generation, shaping the destinies of gods and mortals alike. Zeus, for all his power, learned that wisdom must be embraced, not feared, and that the future is always born from the choices of the present. So the story continued, the gods watching the horizon for the next turn of fate, their hearts both wary and hopeful beneath the ever-changing sky. The world, shaped by the hands of gods and the echoes of prophecy, settled into its new rhythm. Olympus stood proud, its halls filled with laughter and debate, while the Titans languished in Tartarus, their power bound by chains forged from fate itself. Yet beneath the surface of peace, the ancient earth stirred with restless memory. Gaia, mother of all, watched her Titan children suffer in the depths, their cries reverberating through stone and shadow. Her heart, vast and enduring, could not bear the injustice. From her sorrow and anger, Gaia conceived a force unlike any before, a child born not of love, but of vengeance and chaos. Typhon, monstrous and immense, rose from the earth, his form a living storm. His 100 heads spat fire and venom, his voice thundered across the land, and his wings blotted out the sun. The gods, who had grown accustomed to their thrones, trembled at the sight of this new terror. Typhon was the embodiment of rebellion, a reminder that the cycle of conflict was never truly broken. Zeus, king of the sky, gathered his siblings and allies, their courage tested by the fury of Typhon. The battle that followed shook the very foundations of the world. Mountains crumbled, rivers boiled, and the sky itself seemed to fracture under the weight of their struggle. Typhon hurled boulders and storms, his rage fueled by Gaia's grief, while Zeus answered with thunderbolts, his resolve hardened by the memory of past wars. The gods fought bravely, but Typhon's strength was unmatched. He seized Zeus, tearing the sinews from his hands and feet, and cast him into a cave, his power seemingly broken. The world teetered on the edge of ruin, the promise of order threatened by the return of chaos. Yet hope flickered in the darkness. Hermes, swift and clever, stole into Typhon's lair and restored Zeus's strength, whispering words of encouragement and defiance. Renewed, Zeus rose from the shadows, his thunderbolts blazing brighter than ever. He confronted Typhon in a final desperate clash, the fate of gods and mortals hanging in the balance. With a cry that echoed through eternity, Zeus hurled his mightiest bolt, striking Typhon down and burying him beneath Mount Etna, where his fury would rumble but never again threaten the world. Gaia, her vengeance spent, retreated into silence, her heart heavy with loss and longing. The gods, victorious but humbled, returned to Olympus, their thrones now symbols not just of power, but of resilience. The world, scarred but enduring, began to heal, its story enriched by the lessons of rebellion and mercy. And so the cycle continued, creation and conflict, order and chaos, woven together in the tapestry of myth. The gods watched the horizon, knowing that peace was always fragile, and that the seeds of change lay hidden in every shadow. In the quiet after Typhon's defeat, Olympus glowed with a new sense of order. The gods, though scarred by battle, found comfort in their thrones and the steady rhythm of the world. Yet, beneath the surface of peace, the old questions lingered, about power, justice, and the fate of mortals who gazed up at the sky and wondered at the whims of their divine rulers. Among the Titans, one remained who did not brood in Tartarus nor rage against Olympus. Prometheus, whose name meant forethought, watched the world with keen eyes and a restless heart. He saw the mortals, fragile and uncertain, struggling to survive in a land of cold nights and dark forests. Unlike his kin, Prometheus felt a spark of compassion for these small, clever beings. He saw in them the seeds of hope, the promise of stories yet unwritten. Prometheus approached Zeus asking for a gift for humanity, a spark of fire, the secret of warmth and light. But Zeus, wary of mortal ambition and mindful of the chaos that power could bring, refused. Fire, he declared, was for the gods alone. Mortals must remain humble, their lives shaped by the whims of nature and the mercy of Olympus. Prometheus, undeterred, resolved to defy the king of gods. One night, beneath a sky heavy with stars, he crept into the halls of Olympus. With cunning and courage, he stole a glowing ember from the sacred hearth and carried it down to the mortal world. He placed the fire in the hands of humanity, teaching them to build hearths, forge tools, and cook their food. The world changed overnight. Villages glowed with warmth, and the darkness retreated before the new light. Zeus, discovering the theft, was furious. His thunder shook the mountains, and his anger burned brighter than any flame. Prometheus was seized and brought before the gods, his defiance a challenge to the order Zeus had fought so hard to create. As punishment, Zeus chained Prometheus to a lonely rock on the edge of the world. Each day an eagle descended to devour his liver, which grew back each night, ensuring his suffering was endless. Yet, even in torment, Prometheus did not regret his choice. He watched the fires flicker in mortal homes, saw the rise of civilization, and knew that his sacrifice had changed the world forever. The gods, for all their power, could not unmake the gift he had given. Humanity, armed with fire and knowledge, began to shape its own destiny, forging a path between the whims of Olympus and the wild promise of the earth. And so, the story continued, of rebellion and mercy, of suffering and hope. The gods learned that power could be challenged, and mortals discovered that even the smallest spark could light the way through darkness. Prometheus's tale became a lesson whispered through the ages, that wisdom and courage, even in the face of divine wrath, could kindle the flame of possibility. After Prometheus's daring gift and the birth of fire among mortals, the world glowed with new possibility. Villages flickered with warmth, and the night lost some of its ancient terror. Yet, with every spark, Zeus's anger smouldered. He saw the rise of human ambition, the clever hands shaping tools, and the curious minds questioning the order of things. The king of gods, ever wary of rebellion, resolved to remind mortals of their place beneath Olympus. Zeus summoned Hephaestus, the divine smith, and together they shaped a new creation, not of earth or sky, but of cunning and beauty. From clay and breath they formed Pandora, the first woman, her eyes bright with curiosity and her smile edged with mystery. The gods gathered, each bestowing a gift. Aphrodite gave her grace, Hermes gave her wit, Athena gave her skill, and Hera gave her charm. Yet, hidden among these blessings was a secret purpose, a lesson for mortals, a warning wrapped in wonder. Into Pandora's hands Zeus placed a jar sealed tight and heavy with the weight of the unknown. He spoke no word of its contents, only that it must never be opened. Pandora descended to the world of men, her presence a marvel and a puzzle. Mortals welcomed her with awe, their hearts stirred by her beauty and their minds tempted by the mystery she carried. Days passed, and Pandora's curiosity grew. The jar sat in the corner, silent and alluring, its secrets whispering to her in the quiet hours of the night. The world outside was filled with laughter and light, but within Pandora a storm of questions brewed. Why had Zeus given her this burden? What lay hidden within its depths? The promise of knowledge tugged at her soul, and the silence became unbearable. At last, unable to resist, Pandora lifted the lid. In an instant the air was filled with chaos. From the jar poured every sorrow and hardship, pain, sickness, jealousy, and despair, swirling through the world like a bitter wind. Mortals cried out as their lives were touched by suffering, the golden age shattered by the weight of new burdens. Pandora, horrified, tried to close the jar, but the evils had already escaped, spreading far and wide. Yet, as she wept, a final presence stirred within the jar. Hope, gentle and persistent, fluttered out and lingered among the ruins. Though the world was changed, and suffering now walked beside every mortal, hope remained, a quiet promise that even in darkness, light could be found. Zeus watched from Olympus, his lesson delivered. The god saw that mortals, though wounded, would endure, their spirits buoyed by the gift of hope. Pandora's tale became a warning and a comfort, whispered through generations, that curiosity brings both sorrow and possibility, and that even when the jar is opened and the world is changed, hope endures, shining softly in the hearts of all who dream. The world, shaped by gods and scarred by the opening of Pandora's jar, pressed onward beneath the watchful gaze of Olympus. Mortals learned to live with sorrow and hope entwined, forging their destinies in the shadow of divine will. Yet the story of creation and conflict was far from finished. Deep within the ancient earth, Gaia's heart still beat with memory and longing, her spirit restless as she watched the children of Olympus rule the world her body had birthed. The Titans, imprisoned in Tartarus, groaned in their chains, their voices echoing through the abyss. Gaia, wounded by the loss of her children and the suffering of the world, felt her grief twist into anger once more. From this pain, she summoned a force unlike any before, a creature born not of love or vengeance alone, but of pure, untamed chaos. Thus Typhon was conceived, a monster whose very presence threatened the order the gods had fought so hard to build. Typhon rose from the depths, his form a living nightmare. His body towered above mountains, his 100 heads hissed and roared, each one spewing fire, venom, and storm. His eyes blazed with fury, and his wings cast shadows that swallowed the sun. The earth trembled beneath his steps, and mortals fled in terror as the sky darkened with his wrath. Typhon was the embodiment of Gaia's rage, a challenge hurled at the gods who had forgotten the cost of victory. Olympus shook as Typhon approached, and the gods, for all their power, felt fear grip their hearts. Zeus, king of the sky, rallied his siblings and allies, their courage tested by the monstrous force before them. The battle that followed was unlike any the world had seen. Thunderbolts clashed with storms of fire, mountains shattered and rivers boiled. Typhon hurled boulders and hurricanes, his rage fueled by Gaia's sorrow, while Zeus answered with the full fury of the heavens. For a moment it seemed the old order would fall. Typhon seized Zeus, tearing the sinews from his hands and feet, and cast him into a cave, his power broken and the world teetering on the edge of ruin. Yet hope flickered in the darkness. Hermes, swift and clever, stole into Typhon's lair and restored Zeus's strength. whispering words of encouragement and defiance. Renewed, Zeus rose from the shadows, his thunderbolts blazing brighter than ever. He confronted Typhon in a final desperate clash, the fate of gods and mortals hanging in the balance. With a cry that echoed through eternity, Zeus hurled his mightiest bolt, striking Typhon down and burying him beneath Mount Etna, where his fury would rumble but never again threaten the world. Gaia, her vengeance spent, retreated into silence, her heart heavy with loss and longing. The gods, victorious but humbled, returned to Olympus, their thrones now symbols not just of power, but of resilience. The world, scarred but enduring, began to heal, its story enriched by the lessons of rebellion and mercy. With Typhon buried deep beneath Mount Etna, and the world slowly healing from chaos, the gods of Olympus turned their gaze to the mortals below. The gift of fire stolen by Prometheus had changed humanity forever. Villages glowed with warmth, and the night was no longer a realm of fear. Yet, with every new dawn, mortals grew bolder, their hands shaping tools and their minds dreaming of wonders beyond the reach of gods. Zeus, ever watchful, saw the rise of heroes among men, figures whose courage and strength echoed the ancient struggles of gods and titans. These heroes did not simply accept the world as it was. They challenged monsters, solved riddles, and sought glory in the face of danger. Their stories spread like wildfire, inspiring others to seek greatness, even as the gods looked on with a mixture of pride and unease. The monsters that haunted the land were not mere beasts, but echoes of the old world. Creatures born from the blood of Uranus, the rage of Gaia, and the chaos of Tartarus. Cerberus, the three-headed hound, guarded the gates of the underworld. The Hydra lurked in the swamps, its heads multiplying with every strike. The Chimera prowled the mountains, breathing fire and terror. Medusa, cursed with serpents for hair, turned all who gazed upon her to stone. Each monster was a living riddle, a challenge sent by fate to test the mettle of mortals. Heroes rose to meet these trials. Heracles, son of Zeus, faced the Hydra and the Nemean lion, his strength matched only by his perseverance. Perseus, guided by Athena, sought out Medusa, armed with a mirrored shield and a heart full of resolve. Theseus braved the labyrinth, confronting the Minotaur and freeing Athens from fear. Each victory was hard won, paid for in sweat and sorrow, but each triumph brought new hope to the world. The gods watched these struggles with interest, sometimes lending aid, sometimes setting new challenges. They saw in the heroes a reflection of their own battles, a reminder that greatness was forged in conflict, and that even mortals could shape the fate of the world. The monsters, though fearsome, became symbols of the obstacles that all must face, their defeat a promise that courage could overcome even the darkest of nightmares. In the quiet moments after battle, the heroes rested, their stories woven into the tapestry of myth. The world, scarred but enduring, learned that monsters were not just foes to be vanquished, but lessons to be understood. Each challenge brought wisdom, each victory a new beginning. The gods, for all their power, saw that the spirit of rebellion and hope lived on in every mortal heart, and that the cycle of struggle and triumph would continue as long as stories were told beneath the stars. As the stories of heroes and monsters echoed through the valleys and across the seas, the world itself began to change. The Titans, once rulers of all, now lingered in memory and myth, their names spoken in hushed tones around the hearth and in the shadowed corners of temples. Yet their presence was not erased. It was transformed. The ancient beings who had shaped the cosmos became more than figures of rebellion and defeat. They became symbols, woven into the very fabric of nature and time. The Greeks, ever wise in the ways of metaphor, saw the Titans not only as lost kings, but as the forces that moved the world. Oceanus, once a river encircling the earth, became the endless flow of the seas, his spirit felt in every wave and tide. Hyperion, the light-bringer, was no longer just a father of gods, but the golden dawn itself, the promise of each new day. Mnemosyne, mother of memory, lingered in every story told, every lesson learned, her gift the thread that bound past to present. The Titans' rebellion, once a tale of violence and ambition, grew into an allegory for the cycles of nature. Kronos, who had devoured his children, became time itself, relentless, consuming, yet always moving forward. The Greeks marked the passing of seasons, the growth of crops, and the aging of mortals as the work of Kronos, a reminder that all things must yield to change. Rhea, gentle and enduring, was seen in the earth's fertility, her patience reflected in the slow unfolding of spring. Even the monstrous children of Gaia and Uranus found new meaning. The Cyclopes, with their single blazing eye, became the fire in the forge, the spark of invention. The Hecatonchires, with their 100 arms, were the storms that shook the mountains and the earthquakes that split the ground. Their wildness was no longer a threat, but a part of the world's rhythm, a force to be respected, not feared. As philosophers and poets pondered the mysteries of existence, the Titans became guides in the search for understanding. Their stories were retold as lessons in humility, wisdom, and the acceptance of fate. The old battles between gods and Titans were seen not just as struggles for power, but as the eternal dance between order and chaos, creation and destruction. The Titans, though defeated, were honoured as the foundation upon which all else was built. In this new age, the world was richer for its history. The Olympians ruled from their thrones, but the Titans lived on in every sunrise, every storm, every memory. Mortals learned to see the divine not only in the faces of gods, but in the turning of the seasons and the passage of time. The spirit of the Titans endured, a quiet strength beneath the surface, reminding all who listened that greatness is born from struggle, and that the wild, untamed forces of existence are never truly gone. They are simply transformed, waiting to be discovered anew. As the Titans faded into symbols and the Olympians ruled from their lofty thrones, the world below began to stir with new energy. The age of gods, with its thunderous battles and cosmic upheavals, slowly gave way to the age of heroes, a time when mortals, inspired by the legends of old, dared to challenge fate and carve their own stories into the tapestry of myth. It was a world still haunted by the echoes of rebellion and the wild forces of nature. Monsters roamed the land, remnants of ancient chaos. The Hydra lurked in its swamp, multiplying heads with every strike. The Nemean lion prowled with an impenetrable hide. The Chimera breathed fire across the hills, and Medusa, cursed and sorrowful, turned all who met her gaze to stone. These creatures were not merely obstacles, but living reminders of the world's untamed past, each one a riddle waiting to be solved. Into this landscape stepped the heroes, figures born of mortal mothers and divine fathers, or sometimes simply of extraordinary courage. Heracles, son of Zeus, was tasked with labours that tested the limits of strength and wit. Perseus, guided by Athena, braved the lair of Medusa, armed with a mirrored shield and a heart full of resolve. Theseus ventured into the labyrinth, confronting the Minotaur and freeing his city from fear. Jason sailed the perilous seas in search of the Golden Fleece, his journey a testament to the power of hope and unity. Each hero's tale was a thread in the ever-growing tapestry of myth, woven with both triumph and tragedy. Their victories were hard-won, paid for in sweat, sorrow, and sacrifice. Yet, with every monster vanquished and every riddle solved, the world grew a little brighter, a little safer. The gods watched from Olympus, sometimes lending aid, sometimes setting new challenges, their own stories reflected in the struggles of those below. The rise of heroes marked a shift in the balance of power. No longer were mortals mere pawns in the games of gods. They became agents of change, capable of shaping their own destinies. The lessons of the Titans, of rebellion, endurance, and transformation, lived on in every act of courage. The monsters, once symbols of chaos, became teachers, their defeat a promise that even the darkest forces could be overcome. In the quiet after each adventure, the heroes rested, their stories told and retold around fires and in the halls of kings. The world, shaped by both divine and mortal hands, learned that greatness was not reserved for gods alone. The spirit of the Titans, the wisdom of the Olympians, and the courage of heroes all mingled in the hearts of those who dreamed beneath the stars. And so, the cycle continued. Creation and conflict, order and chaos, struggle and triumph, woven together in the endless story of the world. The Age of Heroes was a new dawn, a promise that every generation could rise, challenge the unknown, and leave its mark upon the earth. The Age of Heroes, with its daring quests and hard-won victories, left the world changed in ways both subtle and profound. Mortals, once timid beneath the gaze of Olympus, now walked with heads held high, their hearts emboldened by tales of courage and triumph. Yet, beneath the surface of every legend, the old struggles persisted, echoes of rebellion, suffering, and the ceaseless quest for meaning. The gods, watching from their thrones, saw that mortals were no longer content to accept fate without question. The lessons of Prometheus and Pandora lingered. Wisdom could be won through defiance, and hope could endure even in the face of sorrow. The world was no longer a stage for divine whims alone. It had become a place where mortals shaped their own destinies, sometimes with the help of the gods, sometimes in spite of them. But with every act of bravery came a price. The monsters that haunted the land were not vanquished forever. New dangers arose, each one a test of resolve and ingenuity. The labyrinths grew more complex, the riddles more cunning, and the shadows deeper. Heroes learned that victory was never absolute, and that suffering was woven into the fabric of existence. The gods, too, were reminded of their limits, their power tempered by the unpredictable will of mortals. In the quiet moments between battles, mortals pondered the meaning of their struggles. They saw in the myths a reflection of their own lives, the longing for justice, the pain of loss, the joy of discovery. The stories of Titans and Olympians became allegories for the human condition, teaching that greatness was born not only from strength, but from endurance, compassion, and the willingness to question. Philosophers and poets gave voice to these truths, weaving them into songs and stories that would echo through the ages. They spoke of the cycle of power, the inevitability of change, and the importance of hope. They taught that suffering was not a punishment, but a teacher, guiding mortals toward wisdom and empathy. The gods, for all their might, could not shield the world from pain, but they could inspire mortals to rise above it. And so, the world continued to turn, each generation facing its own trials and forging its own path. The spirit of rebellion lived on in every act of defiance, the legacy of suffering in every lesson learned, and the promise of hope in every dream pursued. The gods watched, sometimes with pride, sometimes with sorrow, as mortals embraced the fullness of their humanity. The age of heroes faded into legend, but its lessons endured. The world, shaped by conflict and compassion, became a place where every struggle mattered, and every victory, no matter how small, was a step toward understanding. In the end, the greatest gift of myth was not power or immortality, but the wisdom to endure, to question, and to hope, even when the night was darkest and the future uncertain. The world, shaped by the wisdom of suffering and the courage of heroes, moved ever onward beneath the gaze of Olympus. Yet even as new stories unfolded and mortals learned to endure, the memory of the Titans lingered, ancient and unyielding, woven into the very bones of the earth. Though their bodies lay imprisoned in Tartarus, their spirits wandered freely, casting long shadows across the dreams of gods and men. The Titans, once rulers of chaos and creation, had become more than mere figures of myth. They were the wild winds that swept the mountains, the deep rumble of the earth before a storm, the restless tides that pulled at the shores. Their legacy was not forgotten. It lived in every moment of awe and uncertainty, every whisper of rebellion that stirred the hearts of mortals. The Greeks saw the Titans in the untamed places of the world, in the thunder that rolled without warning, in the forests that grew thick and wild, defying the order of cultivated fields. As the Olympians built their shining palaces and mortals raised temples in their honor, the Titans became symbols of the primal forces that could never be fully tamed. Kronos, once a king, was now the slow march of time, his presence felt in the aging of trees and the fading of memories. Oceanus was the endless flow of water, his spirit in every river and rainstorm. Mnemosyne lingered in the stories told by firelight, her gift the memory that kept the past alive. The world learned to live with these shadows, to honor the Titans not with fear, but with respect. Philosophers spoke of balance, of the need to embrace both order and chaos, both reason and wildness. Poets sang of the Titans as the source of inspiration, the spark that drove mortals to question, to dream, to rebel against the boundaries set by gods and fate. The Titans, though defeated, had become the guardians of possibility, the reminder that greatness often comes from the places least expected. In the quiet moments between storms, mortals felt the presence of the Titans, a shiver in the wind, a tremor in the ground, a sudden rush of longing for something beyond the known. The Olympians, for all their power, could not erase these ancient forces. They could only build upon them, shaping a world that was richer for its wildness and its mystery. And so the story continued, each generation finding its own way to honor the Titans. Their legacy endured in every act of courage, every question asked, every dream pursued against the odds. The world, forever marked by their rebellion and resilience, learned that the greatest strength lies not in conquering the wild, but in learning to live alongside it, to draw wisdom from its depths and inspiration from its untamed beauty. The Titans, forgotten by some, remembered by others, remained eternal, woven into the fabric of myth and into the hearts of all who dared to wonder. So the world spun onward, its tapestry woven from the threads of gods, titans, heroes, and mortals alike. The stories of rebellion and endurance, of suffering and hope, echoed through the valleys and across the seas, whispered by the wind and remembered in the hush of night. The Titans, though cast down, were never truly gone. Their spirit lingered in every act of courage, every question asked, every dream pursued against the odds. The Olympians ruled from their shining heights, their laughter and quarrels shaping the fate of mortals below. Yet, even they felt the pull of the old stories, the reminder that power is never absolute, and that greatness is born from struggle. Zeus, king of the sky, watched the world with wary eyes, knowing that the cycle of creation and conflict would never truly end. Hera's wisdom guided the gods through tangled paths, while Poseidon's storms and Hades' shadows kept the balance between order and chaos. Mortals, inspired by the legends of titans and heroes, learned to seek their own destinies. They built cities and sailed unknown seas, faced monsters and solved riddles, their lives a testament to the enduring spirit of myth. The lessons of the past, of rebellion, mercy, and transformation, became the foundation for every new beginning. Philosophers pondered the mysteries of existence, poets sang of love and loss, and storytellers wove the old tales into the fabric of daily life. In every generation, the spirit of the Titans flickered anew. Children listened to stories by the hearth, their eyes wide with wonder at the wild forces that shaped the world. Farmers felt the presence of Kronos in the turning of the seasons, sailors honoured Oceanus in the restless tides, and elders remembered Mnemosyne and the stories that bound families together. The Titans, once feared and forgotten, became guides and guardians, their legacy a quiet strength beneath the surface of things. The gods, for all their might, learned humility in the face of fate. They saw that even the smallest spark of hope could light the way through darkness, and that every act of courage, no matter how humble, was a tribute to the ancient power that shaped the cosmos. The world, scarred but enduring, grew richer for its history, its beauty deepened by the memory of struggle and the promise of renewal. And so, the story continued, endlessly unfolding, each day a new thread in the tapestry of myth. The Titans lived on in every act of questioning, every leap of faith, every moment when mortals dared to reach beyond the limits of the known. The world, forever marked by their spirit, learned that greatness comes not from power alone, but from the courage to change, to endure, and to hope. In the hush before sleep, with ancient chaos rumblings a background, the seeds of everything were sown once more, and the tale of the Titans whispered on.